Hi, everyone. My name is Jancy McPhee, and I'm the Executive Director of SciArtExchange. And we are welcoming you to Design Your Habitat today. We have a fabulous speaker, Christina Ciardullo. She's a space architect, and you'll be able to ask her questions at any point through the live commenting through this Facebook premiere. So feel free to ask questions at any point. So let me tell you a little bit about Christina. She has a very impressive background. She has degrees in astronomy, philosophy, and architecture from Columbia. She's also worked a lot of very prestigious places, and she's getting a PhD from Yale in architecture ecosystems. Currently, she works at a place called LAVA, which stands for Laboratory for Visionary Architecture, and she's a senior architect there. And Lava focuses on sustainable ecosystems, and they've done some really incredible designs, and you've really got to check it out. Also, she's the co-founder of an organization called Search Plus, which stands for Space Exploration Architecture, and they focus on research collaborations for science and technology integration for architecture in extreme environments like space. So she's really an expert in talking about space habitats. She's also a wonderful poster child for what we call STEAM education, which is combining a technical understanding in science, technology, engineering, and math, and in arts and design. And it's probably helped her to be a very creative and productive technical expert. So let's jump right in and talk with Christina. And we'll start by just asking you, so Christina, what are the key environmental factors that you have to think about when you're designing a space habitat?
Yeah, so I mean, it's not very different than creating a place for Earth. I mean, you'll always be inside in space, and you're inside much of the time you're on Earth. In fact, it's said that you're inside about 90% of the time. So it's just, there's a few other extra conditions for space, which we need to think about. And it's the same as if you were on Earth, you're designing for sort of, when it rains or when it's really cold, environmental factors that make you more comfortable being inside than outside. And there are a lot more in space than there are here on Earth. The first is environmental drivers like the air pressure that you need to keep your bodies together. You need to breathe, so that's why a lot of the space habitats you see look like balloons that are inflatable, or these tin cans. It's a pressure can. It's an aerosol can. So that's the most significant driver. Then, of course, is the radiation environment. In space, on Earth, we're protected from most of the solar radiation, but in space, it can be really harsh. So we need to protect ourselves from that, and also the extremes of temperature, from going from significantly hot to significantly cold in an instant. And if you think about being in a building on Earth, those are the kinds of things you're supposed to be protected from the environment inside your building, so you remain comfortable inside.
Right.
And the other factors that we think about are, how do we make it? How do we build the thing? How do we get there? How do we move the materials there? How big's the rocket that you need to put everything in? What's there that we can use to build with already? What's the dirt that we have, the regolith that we can use to build with? What are the other resources we have there? And how do we build? What kind of machinery do we need? Do we need cranes and diggers, or are we just going to build with small robots, or with astronauts themselves? So that takes a lot of, that's really important in thinking about what your habitat would be like. And then the last...
And we don't even think about those things as we watch people build houses and big apartment complexes and commercial buildings. How much more difficult it is to get the construction materials to another location. You're dealing with a difference in atmosphere, change in gravity. So it's pretty cool to think about doing construction off the planet.
I mean, it makes you really think about where your things come from. Like, where did the glass in your window get made? Where was the raw materials for that? Where was all the energy that went into producing that surface? When did they put the frame on it? How did that get delivered to your house? And the whole cycle that all has to happen in space, or, you know, we have to bring it with us. So we have to think about how we bring it. So it's a big factor.
That's really, really interesting and very, very complicated. And that's one of the things everyone's trying to figure out right now, because of course we are talking about building long-term habitats on the moon and eventually building them on Mars. And so this is all, you know, this isn't just dreams right now. We're really trying to prepare for the future that's not that far away.
I mean, we're thinking a lot about, especially now, the moon. You know, there's been a call to go back to the moon, and one of the biggest things that's been coming up is 3D printing, and how do you use the lunar dust to make concrete or make a building material, and you know, what is that equivalent on Earth, and how does it work? Is it the same way that it works on Earth? So it's real, and it's happening now, and we're 3D at the same time. We're 3D printing buildings now on Earth, so it's all happening now, and it's really exciting.
So not do we only, so we learn tips for things we're doing on Earth from our experiences in space. So there's really a connection, and both things are evolving and growing at the same time.
Absolutely.
So let me ask a little bit, what do you need to, what elements and systems do you need to think about when you're trying to build a space habitat? You already mentioned some of them, you know, where do the materials come from, but you know, I think we also started to talk about food and water. I mean, what are some of the things you have to consider?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a good thing to break it down into sort of what the human body needs to survive, and then what a human being needs to live or thrive. So to survive, as you said, we need food, water, we need to sleep, we need air. We need to think about what we can get from the environment itself and what we need to bring with us. Do we need food in packages that we ship from Earth or from your freezer or from your local grocery store? Or can we grow stuff where we are and eat it where we are? And maybe all the waste that we make goes back into the cycle of making more food. That's certainly more efficient in space than always having to resupply. Don't know the extent to which the same efficiency is here on Earth, but I think, you know, it's important to start thinking about those things that we need and what we're able to make where we are versus what we need to continue to bring from somewhere else. And the building itself, as we said, needs to provide that protection from the environment, and we need to be able to reuse and recycle all the resources we use inside of it.
So even more so than we currently do on the Earth, but I think you're probably going to talk about this a little bit more. There's some really good things we can learn from thinking about having to build these very sustainable, closed, small environments in a very far away location where there aren't a lot of resources and we can't just walk outside and breathe. But a lot of the things that we can learn can also be, again, applied back here on Earth. And I think it's an interesting thing to think about at this time when we're all in we're not in a closed environment, but we are in a very limited environment, and we're probably going to be there for a while. So it'd be interesting to talk about being more efficient and sustainable. So I think this is all really great stuff for what's going on with all of us now.
I mean, and of course, being inside is not only about surviving, but as we talked about, it's thriving. So you think about what our spaces give to us in terms of providing us a place to work, a place to sleep, a place to go to the bathroom, a place to be together with other people, your family, or those who are quarantining with you, or space to be alone and be private. All those things are also what a space provides, and are very important also to talk about when you're talking about designing your place.
Well, yeah, I totally agree, and it's particularly challenging to be in closed, limited environments with the same people over and over again. So I'm really excited. I want to hear about some of the space habitats that Search Plus has actually put together, and so maybe you can tell us a little bit about your work at Search Plus in detail, and a little bit about at least, you know, two of your designs that you guys did.
Yeah, I mean, we've been really lucky. I mean, it's not every day that an architect gets to design something for space, and it's totally fun. And NASA had these great opportunities recently. It's called the Centennial Challenges, and we put together teams to work on those. And there were several of these challenges over the last several years, and we always try to get an interdisciplinary mix of scientists and engineers working with us. And, yeah, I mean, it's amazing. And, you know, they give us so much information. We as the architects are kind of, in a sense, beautifully naive in that we come in and ask very basic questions about, like, well, you know, so, I mean, how do you get the water there? Like, so, and it sort of reframes the scientist's perspective a little bit. And then we also get to work with these engineers, a lot of them who work on, you know, like skyscrapers and bridges, and they're like so excited to work on space. It's just like, it's really fun. Everybody is so passionate about it, and space has this way of bringing together so many different kinds of people, and so that kind of team really is inspiring, and that's what we've been building at Search, as a sort of interdisciplinary team, and that means we can also have very much evidence-based design. So it's not just an image of what we might love, but it's something that we also think can work. So
and great things come from those interdisciplinary teams. It's not just inspiration, but the creativity and all the technical meshing just works out really awesomely. So yes, so please tell us a little bit about some of your stuff.
Yeah, I mean, like the first home that we came together officially designed was called the Ice House, and that was based on seeing a lot of habitats that were underground and buried a lot, buried in sand and buried in the regolith, and we were like, well, you know, if we're going to go there, let's go there, let's be there, you know. There are human beings that are going there theoretically, not just rovers or satellites, which are also great tools. But, you know, if we had a rover there, couldn't we just like zoom into Mars and see it from there? What would be the point of humans being there? And we thought about, you know, being able to be connected to your new landscape, being able to look out the window, knowing whether it's night or day. So we really focused on like, okay, what can we do? But let's say there's, you know, a huge window. Why not? Why not put a huge glass window or a glass dome? And that has to do with radiation. If, let's say we could do it technically, let's say we brought all the materials and had all the stuff, we could make it work, but then we wouldn't be able to address the radiation issue. It's letting in a lot of light. So the Ice House was the sort of synthesis of, we're going to use the water ice that's theoretically on Mars, and it's going to be translucent, or in some cases transparent, and we could see the landscape we're in. And it's a great radiation shield. Water.
So water is a great shield for radiation, and so you're taking advantage of what was available and repurposing it to have both a beautiful and a functional purpose. So that sounds perfect.
Yeah, I mean, it's like, you know, there was a move in the last several decades to more glass buildings, and sure, everybody loves to be able to look out the window. And then this is sort of kind of rethinking material. Instead of just using concrete or bricks, like let's see what's Mars glass. Mars glass might be water. So,
and you also had a different model in mind where you used 3D printing. And for those of us who aren't really sure, regolith is basically referring to the soil that's on Mars. And so it's one of the resources, besides the water ice, that potentially could be used to design a habitat for living on Mars. So you want to tell us a little bit more about one of your other designs?
Yeah, you know, actually after that, NASA got a little bit realistic on us. And they said, well, it's going to take a long time to mine all that water for your building. So in fact, in the next Centennial Challenge, they made a detriment if we were using water. So we said, okay, fine, we'll go with you guys, and we'll use the regolith. And so, but we still have that same kind of concept in mind of how do you get light into this building? Like it's a brick, imagine it's a brick or concrete building. you know, how many windows can we put in there? And one of the ways was to make it taller, to make more opportunity for more surface area, for more light to come in, and we were able to make very deep windows, which acted as like as a shade. Imagine if you had a big louver or a big shade outside, and that prevents a lot of light from coming in, but you could still see out your window. So very, very like tried and true architectural technique on Earth. And yeah, that's how we use the same design principles of livability with light and connection to your environment.
Yeah, that is just so cool. You know, the structures are so beautiful to look at. And, you know, it's just really exciting to see real designs being created that meet the environmental needs and all of that. So maybe you can talk to us about how do we connect some of your knowledge and experience in architecture for space and connect it a little bit more to what's happening here back home with our Earth-based habitats. Maybe it'll help us all have more of a perspective, or maybe you got some tips for us.
No, yeah. I mean,
please.
One of my favorite architects said that we are all astronauts on board Spaceship Earth. And I think it's really a wonderful thing to see when you're designing for a totally alien environment where we haven't been born into, that what the Earth does for us, how much, you know, of our physical being and emotional being is tied to this Earth, and how important it is. So I think it really gives us this perspective about the environment that we're born into, this pale blue dot, as Carl Sagan said, where everybody we've ever known and loved has ever been. And, you know, what that means that we need not only to take care of our Earth, but also how do we sort of recreate its cycles in another place. So, you know, if you think about what humans need, you think about maybe your bed, your kitchen sink, your toilet, what's essential to your survival needs. A lot of things rely on our infrastructure, things that we've built for ourselves or the environment that's outside of us. We can breathe the air because it's outside. A lot of our resources come from infrastructure we've built. So food comes from our supermarkets. Waste is being taken away by the Department of Sanitation, or you dump it down your drain, which is being taken care of at the municipal wastewater treatment center somewhere else. I mean, your energy is being generated somewhere else and coming to you through wires. Your internet is being bounced off of satellites. We've put a lot of stuff around that we rely on. And if you think about having to take care of all of that in one place, that's being closed loop and sustainable. And, you know, could you think about generating everything that you need, all of the energy you need in your house? Do you think about growing all of your food at home? I don't know if it works at the scale of the house, but that's kind of what we need to do on the space habitat. I mean, if you look at the space station, it's four football fields of solar panels for the size of 3 suburban homes. I mean, like maybe at the moment, the technology isn't necessarily there for us on Earth, but maybe that's what we have to do. We need to work together on these issues for Earth and space in order to make our homes, our places of work, our sustainable in that way in terms of our resources. So
what you really do then when you're thinking about these, I guess we can distinguish them as sort of personal habitats and then cities and all the infrastructure. And we're actually going to have a speaker in a couple of weeks who's going to sort of talk about how we move from what we're mostly thinking about right now at home, which is our personal habitats, because we do still have the support of infrastructure.
Yeah.
And I think you're telling us that as we think about our current habitats and also think about, you know, how we might rework them and what's it like on space, is we think about really thinking of the people who are going to use a design, and we think about what do we need versus what would we really like to have, especially for the long term.
Yeah.
So do you want to talk a little bit more about, need versus, want when you're going to be stuck in a situation for a long time?
And I think it's hard to say want, because want makes it sound like it's not necessary, but
Right,
it is.
exactly.
Now I think we know it more than ever. Being sort of confined a little bit is the way that we design our spaces. Sure, we have enough space to sleep, but is that enough for us to go about our day? Not only, let's look at it on two levels. One is the level of being productive, a place that makes it possible for you to work. I mean, we're talking about right now I'm in a 1-bedroom apartment, and when my toddler is up, the only place to go to do some work is in the bedroom. Like, this is not necessarily a very productive place to be. I don't have a desk in here. So, thinking about those spaces, those are needs, the need to do things, to work, to maintain yourself and your surroundings. Those are elements of design that are, perhaps it's not necessary to your physical body, but they are necessary to your physical productiveness in a space.
Right. And we do talk a lot about that when we're thinking about long duration space missions. For much of what we've done, and that's not true on the space station, those are long duration missions,
Yeah.
but for a lot of what we've done, we focused on surviving.
Yeah.
And especially if we're going to go to Mars and it's going to, take 2 or 3 years for the entire round trip, then we're going to really have to think about other things, not just surviving, but also being happy. And I think that's a lot of the things that everybody is struggling with right now is how do I make it so that I have some personal space?
Yeah.
And how do I separate work from eating and sleeping and having some fun in my environment? And I think you have like a whole process there that you use as an architect to think about that. Maybe you could share that.
Yeah. No, as you said, there's definitely the difference between, there's not only being productive, but there's also enjoying. And yes, there's the process that an architect goes through. So I guess I'll tell you what that's kind of like. And I think it starts with mapping your activities. So, we call that programming. So what kind of things do you do every day? If you pay attention to your daily schedules, routines, on the spontaneous events, are they public things that you do with other people? Are they private? Are they group activities? Are they individual? Putting on your clothes and taking off your clothes is an activity. Going, washing your hands is an activity. Walking to the window to sit down, is that an activity? Think about, like, what are the things that actually really are part of your day. And there's a good tool of this. There's a map from NASA that they show you astronaut activities ranked from public and private and group to individual. And it's sort of an interesting exercise to sort of first talk about what kind of things you do. And then you think about the space that activity needs. How much space do you need to clean your body or put your clothes on? How much space do you really need to sleep? How much space do you need at your desk? I mean, I like to sprawl out when I work. I don't know about you, but I like it all over the kitchen table.
And we were talking earlier about how you don't really have a desk right now.
No, it's very difficult. It's very, very difficult to work.
So Christina, you need to redesign your habitat.
I do. I think that I should go along with this. I should do this process alongside with you. I mean, we've been talking about, like, how do we, jerry rig a desk in here and, on top of the toddler's crib,
Right.
But this is really important. Another thing that's interesting, though, is to think about there is the range of the human activity you use, like the range of motion that you use to open the door, the range of motion that you use to put on your clothes. But there's also the things that you have in your room, like the desk or like the fridge or the countertop. But those things are also tied to the human body. There's a reason that a door is a big, tall rectangle in that particular shape. And there's a reason that a countertop is generally 80 centimeters high. You know, those have to do with the metrics of the human body and all that comes from how we are in our physical being. So it's a fun kind of thing to do, to first take your activities and then sort of map how much space that needs, and see what that's really like, and not to forget storage and maintenance. I mean, if you look at that space station, I mean, it's the size of 3 suburban homes, but it's full of stuff. It's full of stuff everywhere.
It's not really attractive inside either. I think that, you know, when we're redesigning all of this again for future missions, I hope we'll sort of maybe make things just a little prettier. I mean, I you know, I'm a scientist, so I'm all about the function too, but it looks a little bit chaotic.
I mean, and that can be very distracting and very uncomfortable. You know, if you have stuff all over, you know, it's hard to focus. And just designing for the activities that you know you'll need, knowing that you will have X amount of equipment, or, you know, need X amount of flat space. Just knowing those kinds of things up front allow you to plan your space a little bit better, and to start really, like, you know, making sure you have room for everything you need.
Well, I wanted to talk, a little bit more about space, because when we were chatting before we got on, we were talking a little bit about how space differs from person to person, the required volume of space that's needed. And it's particularly interesting, of course, when we talk about it in space, because as you pointed out, there's kind of a limit, and things can get much smaller. But you also said it's cultural, and I think that's fascinating.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking about how, you know, there's just an example, these Japanese capsule hotels where people stay literally in just a bed. But I think that there's a lot of Americans who might feel very uncomfortable with that, you know, but why not? It fits the human body. It fits how much area you need to sleep. The bathroom's down the hall. You know, what is it about the way that we're used to space that's just that's sort of a cultural artifact? I mean, I'm from New York City, so I mean, I don't know how many Texans would put up with the kind of amount of space that I'm used to, which is very little. So, you know, it is in a lot of ways a cultural norm that we have to think about. And it's not good or bad, it's just a recognition. And I think a lot of the NASA standards have to do with sort of the 90% male or 90% female in sort of a more universal way, or to try to sort of make everyone sort of a standard person or human being. And that's necessary from a sort of requirements point of view, and from the fact that it's going to be international people going up there. So can't really cater to all of the cultures, or I don't know, maybe there's some kind of way you can move walls or whatnot, but that's a creative process. But, you know, just to notice how much of it is, how much of what you think is what you think, what you physically need or what you productively need, versus what sort of a cultural or experiential part of you instead.
But I also think that what we need really can change with time. So, you know, I know that when I was in college, I lived in a boarding hallway, and we did exactly what you described. We shared the kitchen and the bathroom, and everybody had a little room. And that was fine for what I was doing. And, you know, the space station has limited space. And right now, what's going on, we have our situation, and we need to design to suit what's going on right now. So maybe it's a special time, maybe it's different from the way it was a couple of weeks or months ago, but we can design to make it as wonderful as possible, not just to survive, but as you've been saying, to thrive. And here's my artwork for today. And you can see there's a spacesuit habitat and also a habitat for the flowers. And this is an artwork done for us by Maria Sotnikova, who was a winner in one of our SciArtExchange Project Mars competitions. And when she was a younger person, she also won the Humans in Space Youth Art Competition. So we've got lots of people interested in sharing their visions, and I hope you will all do so the same.
I think it's thinking about what makes a space a place that you love to be. I mean,
so what makes it home?
What makes it home?
Right.
As architects, we're always calling on history and historical examples and talking about experiencing places and thinking about what we love and thinking about what we want to bring to a place that we design. And I think that could be the same. That's sort of also important. Do you have a place in your home where you're drawn to? You love to sit in front of the window? I mean, my first boss as an architect told me that she was designing for the cat because the cat loves to sit in a puddle of light.
Oh my gosh, I would do that. I would totally design for my cats. You know, they're the most important.
And and as the light would change over the course of the day, you could watch the cat move with that puddle of light. You know, I wonder, are there certain things that we do that are the same? Is there a spot in front of your window that you just are drawn to at certain times of the day? Or, you know, if you like being sprawled out on the kitchen table rather than at the desk in front of you, or what are the smells or the sounds or just the textures of the place that make you feel home? I mean, we talk sometimes about a fireplace being the first, or a fire being the first piece of architecture because it's a place that brought people together. So just that quality of bringing people together. How can you design a place to do that? You know, does that mean it's a round table? You know, it's interesting, you know, not too long ago, all the kitchen and all its smells and its workings were separate from everything else in the house. And now we love to have open concepts. And I don't know when exactly that happened or why or what the cultural shift was, but it's just interesting to think about, you know, what makes that place something that you feel comfortable in? What makes it home? Where do you feel like you can cuddle up on the couch, or where you feel like you can really talk to somebody? And those qualities are very important for human beings.
And we also see a lot of, I know that I've seen a lot of changes over the last couple of decades in how we lay out our work environments too. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of us our home is also our work environment. And so we're trying very hard to keep it separate and, you know, think about, you know, how is our body aligned as we're doing it? Is it a separate place so that I can, you know, go in this corner and work and then go in that corner and do my cuddling on the couch with the cat, yeah. You know, and all of that. And in office buildings, you know, we've seen changes in ways to bring people together. You were talking about the fire. Well, maybe it's the brainstorming room. Yeah. And creating more open discussion and cross communication. That's not relevant right now for what's happening with everybody pretty much stuck in one environment, but it just underscores exactly what you said, that sort of philosophies and aims and goals in architecture not only change over the lifetime of a person, but also over the decades. Yeah. So it's really very interesting, and you've given us quite a lot to think about besides telling us about these really cool space habitats you've made. You know, you've also given us some guidelines to think about at home, to start by mapping out our activities and then also mapping our space. And I wanted to say, did you have this really fun thing you could do to map your space relative to having a habitat in space?
Yeah, one of the best things that I used to do with my students is we used to take the plans of a space station, and they could choose the International Space Station or Mir or Tiangong or whatever, and map it out. If you're inside with blue tape on the floor, if you're outside with chalk, and just get a sense of like, how big is that really? It's usually so abstract. Even in a picture, it's kind of abstract. But when you map it out physically, like a one-to-one, it's really great to see how much space that they get to live in and how much space you get to live in, and see the comparison. Maybe it's very similar this time, maybe it's not, but it's really just good to kind of feel like, what would it be like to live in a space station? Just how much space do I have? So that's a fun activity.
So I think that's great because it gives us a lot of perspective, and I think your last tip about telling us to think about, you know, what really makes a place the right place for you, whether it's your corner for being home or your corner for working, you know, what are the characteristics, the qualities that are important? What's the actual design?
Yeah.
And so that this is awesome.
I mean, it's
Been
just
great.
amazing how very much the same it is for Earth and space. You know, not only when we're talking about the resources, but also just physical, like we're talking about bringing human beings to another place. It's very much the same designs that we make here that we make in space. And so, you know, it it's just nice to think about us as, you know, astronauts on Spaceship Earth, um, and think about that correspondence between, like, we could be living like astronauts here. And I just think it gives us such a wonderful perspective, and it is also very inspiring to design for both places at once. But they're very much the same in my mind.
Well, I think you have a super cool job. and it's been really fun talking to you and getting some tips and things that we can all be thinking about. I really think one of the things that's going to happen is that we're all going to walk out of this period eventually, and we're going to have learned some things that are going to help us in the future as well. And I really appreciate your sharing things. It's been awesome chatting with you.
I really appreciate being here and that you're doing this. I hope you all get to make amazing designs, and I can't wait to see them.
Oh yes, please. Everybody's got to share what they design, even if it's your first stage of thinking about it. We want to see what everyone's doing, and that is another way for us to connect during this period. So thank you so much, Christina. Have a great day, and thank your family, please.
I will. Thank you very much for having me.
No worries. Thank you.